Well, it's the end of February, and we're about 6 weeks away from what we would like to call riot season. The issues that face the United States right now don't seem to have the same kind of fervor that they did in 2020 with the killing of George Floyd and the summer of love that came after it, and it doesn't seem to have the same kind of fervor that we had in back in 2013 with the Ferguson riots. But considering the immigration battle that's on deck and the possibility of sending back a lot of illegal immigrants, whether they be here recently or whether they be dreamers or something like that, the possibility of some kind of tension between protesters and the left and law enforcement, or even people on the right, is as real as it's ever been. So today we have a couple guests to talk about that. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, Julio?
Yeah, Julio Rosas. I'm the national correspondent for Blaze Media. I also have my personal Substack, mostly peaceful.media.
Awesome, thank
Kind of
you.
guess where that name comes from.
Thank you very much.
Richie McGinniss. I just took a new gig at Politibrawl, which is the biggest Substack out there. And we just cover what's going on in D.C., put it in real world terms. And I'm also the author of Riot Diet. Get your copy today on the Bezos Boutique.
And he did not bring the.
I forgot the book.
He didn't bring the. Well, he didn't bring the book, and he also didn't bring the gas mask
yes.
that he had last time he was here.
If you go on my Twitter, you can see me get pepper sprayed as a publicity stunt. So check that out.
It's a miserable experience. I mean, you can go watch him do it. You don't want to do it yourself.
Immediately regret it.
So let's jump right into it. There are currently protests that are happening over ICE raids in California. Now, these things do happen nationwide. I think the reason why, like we stated earlier, it's riot season because protesters aren't as motivated to get out when it's 20 degrees outside as they are when it's balmy and they're kind of bored and looking for something to do. With, I think, Netanyahu's visit was an exception.
It was pretty cold, though.
Yeah, that was an exception to the whole season thing. But what are your sense, or what is both of your sense as to how much juice is in the left looking to riot? Do you think that they're looking to protest? Do you think that the issues that are probably the most volatile, do you think they have enough to actually become a nationwide phenomenon, or do you think that it's going to be just pockets?
I think it's mainly going to be pockets, but obviously, those pockets are the big cities, right? Los Angeles, Chicago, New York. And so, because I was in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago covering these protests, and throughout the week, it was mainly high school students who were walking out of school to protest ICE. Now, I know a lot of people kind of like to discount that by saying, oh, they just want us to skip school. And don't get me wrong, I think that was a part of it, especially the one that happened on Friday. But also, they were Latinos. So, I mean, they do have skin in the game, so to speak, at least in their eyes. And so I think it's still too early, but I mean, it's not unreasonable to assume that once the deportations really start ramping up, which I know people are criticizing the pace right now, but it's only been a month. But once they ramp up, once they start to fully envelop more people than just the hardened criminals, I think at that point, then yes. Because, I mean, you see, like, with the TikTok videos, right? You see people do, like, reporting, like, the sightings. You had that radio station out in I think, San Francisco giving out, live reports on what this is, ICE is in this neighborhood at the street. So the resistance is certainly there. I think and in order for it to really go crazy, I think it would kind of have to be kind of like a Jorge Flores type situation where someone gets something, may or may not, look something that looks bad on camera, even if it's not something that looks bad on camera, that it can then kind of spark that wave. But I mean, 2020 was just really unique because it was an election year. There was that COVID background to it, and then and it's no coincidence that it popped off in May, like at the end of May, right? So, just from my point of view, it is going to be a movement for sure. It just needs, I think, a little bit more time to kind of build up any sort of steam in order to have any sort of significant impact in places like New York City or Chicago.
Richie, you're always on the ground too. So do you feel the same kind of energy in the protests that you've been to, say, in the past 2 years leading up to the recent election of Donald Trump? Because one of the things that I think that the president does matter. There's a lot of people on the far left that were very comfortable calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe and stuff. But I feel like that element is a constant. And I think that you need some kind of motivation for people that are more loosely affiliated with politics to get them involved. Yeah. So what's your sense about
well, I've been so Julio, were you out in front of the Columbus statue at Union Station over the summer?
Yeah, I saw you.
Yeah, okay. I
say like I thought you retired.
But that was the biggest like anti-Netanyahu, anti-Israel protest, or Palestine protest of that year. And that was pretty crazy. That was almost at 2020 levels. Recently, this winter, after the election, I was at Netanyahu's last visit to the White House, and there were like, a couple thousand people outside. But actually, what was bigger was the USAID protest that was happening on the same day. It was like twice the size. And the thing that I noticed,
was protesting Doge, right?
That wasn't. Yes, sorry, that was Doge protest. It was before the USAID stuff. But that group of people, I've been out at a couple of those protests. And that's a much older crew. So it's like a lot of people who are federal employees. And I was just out there this week for a protest in front of the Capitol. And I was just amazed. I mean, it was a couple thousand people. So it was a sizable protest, but it was a much, much older group. And I think that group is much different from the pro-Palestine, anti-Israel group, which is a lot younger. So I think it depends on what the topic is and what's happening. But I definitely think moving forward, we're going to see protests around immigration, protests around what's going on in the Middle East, Ukraine, and obviously the Doge.
So you guys feel? Do you agree that there might be protests on Ukraine? Now, the fact that you mentioned that is interesting to me because I don't feel like there is a lot of motivation in young people about the Ukraine situation. I mean, granted, how the negotiations go and what ends up happening in Ukraine, it's possible that could change. But it's my sense that it's not a topic that really puts fire in the belly of the young people that are most likely to get out and get the most rambunctious. What's your thought?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be that might be kind of like it might be at a protest you might see like a Ukraine flag.
Sure,
there of course there's always going to be that one person, right? But in terms of like for a whole movement, I don't see that being like a big catalyst. I mean, look, anything can happen, right? I mean, it's kind of hard. It's hard to predict these things because they're just so chaotic by nature, and that's what makes them fun. But I think the main thing is just going to be that it's going to be mainly focused on immigration, because as we were talking about before we went live, like the Palestinian protests have like really lost steam compared to where they were, because even like so for example, like the DNC. Last year in Chicago, everyone was kind of expecting that to be crazy, and there were moments. Don't get me wrong, but even the turnout was not nearly as big as the protesting groups were projecting. People were guessing. It was people were saying like up to like 100,000, and like I think the busiest was like close to 20,000. Like that was, and I'm not discounting that, but it just shows that at least here in the United States, England is probably a different, different circumstance, just by pure numbers. But like here in the United States, it doesn't have that widespread appeal like BLM did at the beginning. And so, but obviously we have a lot more Latinos here in the United States. So I just purely on a numbers game, and same thing with Ukrainians. Like we don't have that many Ukrainians. Like the people who are going to care about that are like the people in the Beltway, right? Because the money's being threatened now.
Sure, yeah.
But I don't think they're going to burn down the White House or anything or anything crazy like that. So I think it's going to be mainly focused on immigration.
Don't you think there's some fatigue too? Because everybody's been screaming about Trump as a fascist for the last almost 10 years now. And at this point, it's like it's been a 5-alarm fire for nearly a decade. And at what point, that's one thing that I've noticed as well, is with the Doge protests, people have turned their ire towards people like Elon Musk, because Trump is just not the galvanizing figure that he was during BLM, where
he's not new.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like Elon is now kind of public enemy number one.
I mean, I think that it makes sense that Donald Trump is a known quantity now to most Americans, but I think that the fact that he has such a high approval rating now as well, comparatively.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he has, if you told a Democrat, if you told him 3 years ago, Donald Trump's going to win again, he's going to win with the popular vote. And when he wins, he's going to have an approval rating that is on par with any other Republican. They would have lost their minds and they would have said you're crazy because they had convinced themselves that he was this, this unique evil and unique threat. And now with like I said, his approval rating is very, it's normal. It's what you would expect from a normal politician. I don't think that most Americans look at him as, to your point, I don't think most Americans look at him as a threat to democracy or a threat to the United States the way that they used to. Do you think that could change if he does actually become more draconian in his methods, or if he directs the immigration and Homeland Security to become more draconian in their methods surrounding deportations?
Well, define draconian. I guess. So what would you consider?
So everyone that's over a certain age remembers the picture during the Bill Clinton administration where Emilio Gonzalez, I think was his name, and there's a dude literally pointing an MP5 at the father, trying to grab the kid. Everybody remembers that. And that kind of imagery can motivate people. Yeah. And in the modern era where everyone has a cell phone, but just because everyone has a cell phone that records video doesn't mean you get an understanding of what's going on. Because you look at, I think it was Philando Castile that set off the Ferguson, right?
Yeah.
No.
What was his name?
No, Michael Brown.
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown.
No, I'm sorry, not Fred. I'm thinking where Rittenhouse was. You were there.
Jacob Blake.
Oh, Jacob Blake.
Yeah.
Jacob Blake.
Everyone saw that.
Yeah.
They didn't know the context. They didn't know that he had just committed sexual assault. They didn't know that he was trying to kidnap kids. That he had a knife in the car, and they were like, "Oh, that's clearly a bad shoot." Kamala Harris went and took pictures with him. Yep. So even
though he was tased twice right before the video picked up too, so he was just escaping from the police grasp, but he had been tased twice before that.
But it was still enough.
You couldn't see that in like that 7-8 second.
Yeah.
Video.
No, but it was still enough to basically burn down all of Kenosha.
Yeah.
So is it your sense that we're in a position where a photograph or a video that is misunderstood could set things off the way that they did still?
Yeah, and that's what I was referring to about like calling it like Jorge Flores. But yeah, I think, and that's why I think the administration is trying to not necessarily be careful, but they're trying to be prepared for any eventuality that can come to pass like that, because obviously, as we've seen, right, all it takes is one thing, and then everything goes haywire. So that's the unknown quantity. That's kind of like the X factor in all this. And of course, the chances of that happening, of something either is bad or just simply looks bad, is going to increase, just because, like I said, the capacity to carry out this mass deportation is only going to increase as time goes on.
Don't you think that people now, though, are more aware of the way that these things function? Like, you remember the whole thing, was it the Texas National Guard or the Border Patrol, the whipping?
Oh yeah, the Border Patrol, yeah.
And like that was dispelled pretty quickly. People were like,
no, that stayed alive for a lot longer than it should have.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, like today, most people would say, but I mean, that year, a lot of people, I mean, that was like the only thing that got Democrats to the border, right? It was like, so I don't know. You see like stuff that just goes viral on social media still these days, and that aren't as not as like abrupt and in your face about stuff, and people still eat that up. I mean, like example, like when Secretary Hegseth was drinking water, and all these viral posts on X, they're like, oh look, he's drinking on the job, and it's like, no, that's his palm through it. So I don't know. I saw a quick clip of that. It was like 3 scotches for a 20
I saw it
minute.
And I was just like, military guys drinking some whiskey.
Right. No, right. So now you take something as insignificant as like potentially drinking to like someone getting injured or someone getting killed in an ICE raid. I don't know. I think people are still very much primed for just immediately reacting. I think, again, the appeal, like the widespread appeal and the excuse making that we saw back in 2020, because that was constant. I mean, BLM had a 70% approval rating in June of that year. I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you think that that was? Do you think that that was legitimate, or do you think that that was just fear of not saying the right thing? How much? Because there was definitely. I mean, everybody remembers the pictures of people in D.C. surrounding that woman who was like,
Yeah.
and they're just like this, and she's surrounded by basically college kids, and good for her that she never really gave in to him, but that's intimidating. And that really does put a damper on people's ability or people's inclination to stand up and say, no, I don't. And I think this is a bad thing. You were risking a lot by coming out and saying, no, I don't.
Black box on Instagram.
Yeah. I had like friends from college doing that. And I'm thinking, what the hell are you doing? what is this? This doesn't make, which is even funnier because then people are saying, no, because then it blacks everything out. Like, you can't see anything that we post. So, no, I think that was part of it. And so again, I think large parts of the country are smarter because I think they kind of realize the scam that particular movement was. But this is new. It's the current thing, right? It's the current thing right now. So I don't know. It's really hard to get. I mean, it's like trying to poll an election, right? I mean, and that's easier to do than trying to poll people's reactions to a crazy incident. So I don't know, that's inherent, right? Because it's chaotic by nature.
Yeah, I think it's a question of that X factor. Is one of those events going to galvanize people to go to the streets? But secondarily, you remember the kids in cages narrative that literally the cages were built by Barack Obama's administration. That those things being pushed by the likes of CNN and New York Times, they have much less relevance in the discourse today than they did back then, right? They're not driving the discourse anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the result of not just the George Floyd riots in 2020, but I think a large portion of it was because of COVID. I do feel like the majority of people that would consider themselves marginally online, I feel like they're far more savvy about the information that's being given to them, that's being offered. I don't want to say that's being shoved down their throat because we do have a lot of options. We can, click away. We can not read articles and stuff. And I look at the information, the landscape as more like offering and people, or like a smorgasbord or like a tapas. You can go ahead and try a little bit of this, try a little bit of that, but people have the option to say, I don't want to read this, or I don't believe this, so I'm not going to. Now, I think that there's a phenomenon where people tend to put themselves into a bubble when they do that. But at the same time, I do think that you don't have the same penetration with a lie. Pardon me?
I just said, huh.
Yeah, but you don't have the same kind of penetration with a lie or with a misrepresentation, because you brought up the photo of the Border Patrol.
Yep.
And before you mentioned it, I was thinking, pictures probably won't have the same kind of impact because we live in an age of video. But then as soon as you mentioned it, I was like, well, actually, no, it was wrong to think that, because that particular picture really did affect a lot of people. But I feel like the picture was backing up a narrative that people already kind of wanted to believe. And there was a whole cottage industry that was pushing that narrative. I don't feel like there's that same, the industry of discontent has the same impact today.
Well, because and you're bringing up the picture right now, because in order to believe that, you would have to have thought or just assume that Border Patrol is issued whips. And people didn't stop to think, wait, are they issued whips? Like, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Like, we never heard of this before. Like this, and of course, it was just. I mean, you had a whole, that whole part of the year where it's mostly mostly brown people coming across. But of course, the one time where there might be whipping and it's actually black people involved. So
a very dark brown.
Yeah. It was just bad. It was like the circumstances was bad. But again,
Nigeria, the two Nigerians that day.
No, it was Haitians.
What was it?
It was Haitians.
Oh, they're Haitians?
Yeah, that was during the Del Rio Haitian crisis, where 20,000 of them showed up in a week.
Right.
So yeah, it was just bad. It was just really bad timing.
I mean, who wants to stay in Haiti? They were smart to get out of there.
And so,
that's why it went viral, right?
Right. Well, right. So because it's not just a white Border Patrol agent. It's a white on horseback with a quote unquote whip.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. No one. People that were believing that, they never stopped to think, wait. And of course, no, Border Patrol's not issued whips. So I just don't really have faith in people like today. Like a lot of people, obviously, I'm not saying like the majority, but we've just seen too many examples on lesser, like lower stakes,
Yeah.
quote unquote controversies as opposed to something like that in like let's say during an ICE raid in Chicago.
Do you guys think that the size of the protest matters? Because everyone knows that, or not everyone, but most people, especially typically, or specifically guys like you that have been on the ground in these protests, you know that during the day, there are people that you would consider true believers, right? They're there, they believe in the cause, and they're actually there to protest. And those people go home, and the people that are looking to smash things, get buck wild and stuff, those are the guys that either come out at night or they come out later in the day. And that's when the problems start, when riots start, when it becomes people that are fighting the cops and stuff. And if I'm off base here, please, like I said, you guys have been on the ground, but that's my impression. Is that the case, or?
Well, definitely, whether it was BLM or January 6th, it was always the same. You have a massive group of people who are out there with the intention of protesting peacefully, and then you have a much smaller proportion of that group who are going to use that group as an opportunity to agitate cops. And effectively what you have in these situations, because the police are mobilized to pay attention to the protest, in a place like Kenosha, when they're all focused on defending the courthouse, that then gives opportunity to for people to come from outside, because most of the people who were there on the third night of rioting when the shooting happened were not from Kenosha, and they're going to come in there to loot and to burn things down. So I think the one element that's a little bit different now is that there was such a widespread anti-police sentiment in 2020 that I don't think that all cops are bastards. Can I say that? I don't think it's on the same level that it was. With that being said, to answer your question, if you have a large group of protesters, it only takes a very small proportion of them to get the pepper spray out. And once that happens, a lot of those people who are out there with good intentions turn into lizard brains, because you got pepper spray in your eyes. And Julio, what happens when you get the pepper spray going? It's hard to use your frontal cortex when that takes place.
I mean, I would say that the people, because I would say that even the people, and I would even argue say even the people who want to go out and cause violence, I would say that they're truer believers. I think because, and I'll give you an example with the Palestinian protests, right? I've covered a lot. I covered one literally the next day after October 7th. They've been talking. They're talking. They're marching, and you see this kind of online with like different groups, kind of arguing with each other. Okay, you say that there's a genocide happening. You clearly believe it because you're out here. So why are you just going to march around and protest, right? If you truly believe that, like, wouldn't you take more steps to try to stop that? If that's kind of how I'm. So that's why I'm kind of thinking for like Antifa and BLM. I think that they really believe that America is just so so racist and all that, and that's why they want to go out and attack the federal courthouse and all that. So I wouldn't say that the true believers are only the peaceful protesters. Obviously, yes, like they're out there, but I would say that actually people who probably believe most in the cause are the ones that are willing to actually do more than just march around and have a speech. And you see that constant argument between like far left groups about how don't be a protest police, don't help the police, don't we have to do more and all that stuff. So
what is it? Respect. I forget the phrase. Tim says it a lot. It's respect many methods or something along those lines.
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, like there's many ways to protest.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of like their signal where it's just like, you guys can do what you want.
I mean, it's a long and short. They might as well be saying snitches get stitches.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
Exactly.
So it just depends, and obviously, like I said, it depends on what the cause is and what they're out there for. But just generally speaking, and that's why it's even more funny when, particularly with like Antifa and BLM, they say that we're going to abolish we're going to go against the United States government. It's all corrupt. And then as soon as they get arrested, then they start crying about their constitutional rights that they were just rallying against because it's so racist and capitalist and all this other nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, I frequently make a statement or talk about the idea that the left doesn't actually believe in anything. They really are just looking for access to power. So if they can use the Constitution as a way to convince people to not take them to jail or that they're not breaking the law, they will. But as soon as they're not the ones in the crosshairs, then they're like, F your constitutional rights. We don't care about that. You know, the people on, you know,
On January 6th, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and that's why it's funny because like when USA was being shut down, and then you have all the Democrats be like, "Oh, our sacred Constitution doesn't allow this." Like, you guys crap on that all the time. Like, what are you talking about?
And there's nothing in the Constitution says that there has to be a CIA fronted State Department agency that, or you know,
That gives away billions of dollars.
That's one other factor that I think is worth considering. Is Kash Patel he's the FBI director now.
Yeah.
And he, along with Trump, have promised to release the JFK files along with Epstein. And if, 30 years of the dirt is getting dug up, I think people, because if you look at the distrust in the American government historically, that all really started with JFK's assassination. And if we learn that our government had a role in it, which I would argue it did, that could be something that would unify maybe even the left and the right to be angry and take to the streets because, wow, our government was doing this all along.
You don't get the sense that there's already the people that are inclined to believe that already believe that. Or at least, so maybe it's better if I articulate the way I feel about it than trying to ask you. So it's my sense that the people that believe that CIA was responsible for the death of JFK, they kind of have already made their mind up about it. And we've talked about this. I forget who else we were talking about it, but when it comes to, and I want to put a pin in the fact that Kash Patel is the FBI director now, and because that I think does actually affect how things are going to be, how this FBI is going to work in regards to protests moving forward. But as far as the JFK stuff, it's my sense that the people that are inclined to believe it already believe it because, I mean, how long ago did the Oliver Stone movie come out where they...
93 or something.
Yeah, so it's been 30 years since that movie came out, and that was, the implication was there. And I think that if there was confirmation, I don't feel like that would rally people, just like the people that want to believe in UFOs or UAPs or whatever they call them now. When Congress and the government started saying, well, no, actually, we've seen some stuff and these things are, and they started confirming, it wasn't this big, earth-shaking development. People were just like, yeah, we know. And I feel like that might be, I feel like that's the most likely result of it. Another thing you mentioned the Epstein files. I feel like, and back to Kash Patel, I feel like having Kash Patel in the position that he's in, the things like the Epstein files and the CIA files, like it'd be fine. And I like the idea of putting them out. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I think that those things are kind of like red meat to the base. Yeah. And it's going to satisfy certain people that are very focused on it, but to the broad country, I don't think that that information is going to change their daily lives. Whereas I think the way that the FBI prosecutes, or the way that they behave in regard to existing cartel members in the United States, and the way that they work with Homeland Security and ICE to actually deport people, I think that will have more real, tangible effects on everyday Americans' lives. And I would like both of you guys to go ahead and kind of give me your thoughts on that.
And that's what I was saying before, because that's why I think the immigration issue is going to be the flashpoint for this year, more so than the Palestinian-Israel conflict, especially now that it's over, quote unquote. This latest iteration of it is over. We'll check back in 10 years.
We'll see when Trump Hotel goes up in Gaza.
You'll open up a Trump Tower Gaza. I just basically agree with that because, I remember when Congress was saying that, and we got confirmation, and then we had those videos. Yeah, everyone was just like,
everyone's like, sick. Now I don't really believe in UFOs because I don't believe the government. What about their job?
Right. So it's either or, right? So I don't. There are definitely bigger issues that are going to impact people more directly than some of these JFK.
Plus, you have to ask the question of what was the roles of FBI in the civil unrest that took place in 2020 to 21? Because what we found out in court in Kenosha was that the FBI, DHS had a drone up right over the shooting. We didn't get that footage until a year later, a year and some change later. And then they also had a Cessna up above. And people in the FBI who I've talked to say, well, if they had intelligence up in the air, they certainly had human intelligence on the ground. which begs the next question: why weren't they doing anything to stop the burning of the entire city?
Yeah.
And then if you fast forward to January 6th, obviously there were tons of informants who were out on January 6th. And
Nobody that worked for CIA or nobody that worked for the FBI. It was all.
They weren't paid by the FBI.
Exactly.
Is what that means.
They were.
Maybe they had some dirt on them.
They just happened to be there.
And you have to ask the question of like, to what extent, was the FBI stoking this stuff? I'm not saying that they were, but there's a lot of signs that they were out there and not preventing what was happening. And so if Kash Patel is now the director, then he'll probably take more steps to actually stop this civil unrest from spiraling into a power vacuum like we saw in 2020.
Richie, do you have not to get not to ask personal questions about your job and stuff, but like,
open book.
do you have friends that are connected to the administration?
I play hockey against Kash Patel. He's in my hockey league, and he takes a lot of head high clappers. He does, and I will say about Kash Patel, he's been in the league since 2017, 2018, and people on his team, who I've talked to, a bunch of players on his team, they fall all over the political spectrum, but they all find him to be one of the boys, and they all value him as a teammate. And I think that speaks to a lot, because you really get to know somebody when you're in the locker room with them and, hitting the showers after a game.
Sure.
And Kash Patel is well regarded by his teammates. And so I don't think that the FBI is going to be run as a political organization as it was in the past. And I also don't think that, everybody's fearing, this backlash, like he's going to go and target all of Trump's former enemies. I don't see that happening in the way that the left wants it to.
First of all,
that's
crap.
what I voted for. No,
Yeah. First of all, crap, because I was.
Exactly.
That's
But second of all, so do you feel, and I don't want to turn this into a conversation just about the FBI and stuff, or Kash Patel specifically, but do you think that he is going to, do you think that he actually will treat people in Congress that have likely broken the law? Do you think that there will be investigations, or do you think that he will be like, no, we shouldn't do that because they're in Congress? Like,
well, I think if you look at his prior statements, if you broke the law, you broke the law, and I don't think he's going to put on white gloves just to handle somebody who's politically inclined or in Congress just because they have a position of power. And every interview that Kash Patel's ever done, I mean, he said he wanted to turn the FBI building into a museum on day one, which I'd be down for. It's the ugliest building in DC for sure.
Yeah.
But I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because I'm not saying that he's going to abstain from bringing criminal charges to people who have committed serious crimes over the last couple of years. And now that they're trying to hide everything, and they're trying to,
That was going to be my follow-up. Is it your sense that the reason that he got the resistance that he did is because the people that are actually in the Senate and in Congress are actually concerned about their own
Yes, and once you get back into a corner is when you start making bad decisions. So I do think that there will be revelations over the next couple of years. I mean, his term is 10 years long, technically. We'll see what happens in the longer term. But in the short term, over the next couple of years, I do think that there are bodies buried, and I do think that if they didn't do a good job of covering up their crimes, then we're going to learn about that.
Julio, do you have a sense about what type of director Kash Patel would be, and how his involvement or his taking charge of the FBI is going to actually affect kind of day-to-day law enforcement on the federal level?
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see how he takes on the Antifa cells. I mean, that is they had free reign in 2020. I mean, yeah, they might have gotten arrested in Portland or Seattle, but they were just
let out the next night.
Yeah, let out the next night, and that's why it was so crazy. It was interesting to see people who made a big deal about the number of cops injured on January 6th, but they have nothing to say about the federal officers that were injured protecting the federal courthouse in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
And in the book that I wrote, Fire But Mostly Peaceful, about the riots and that particular thing, I mean, you had people charged who were arrested with weapons and were charged with assaulting a federal officer, and nothing happened to them.
Yeah.
They got let out. So that's the new dynamic now, where if there is unrest, like let's say stemming from the immigration issue, I think the FBI is going to actually do stuff to actually identify the players, take down the cells, and actually put people away who commit crimes out in the open in a riot, let's say. So I would be, I don't know, that's like kind of like my only like thing of interest when it comes to him. When it comes to just because these are organized groups to an extent. Obviously, there's different levels, but they don't act just solely on impulse. They there's planning, there's preparation. It's a real thing. It's a real movement.
So when you look at like the pictures that like say Andy No puts up, he gets a lot of the mugshots of Antifa members that are the people on the ground, that are people actually doing the quote unquote dirty work, right? And it can't help but like it looks like, you know, the Joker's henchmen.
Central
right?
casting.
It does look like they always look like they're, you know, they just got done booting up, and their eyes are, you know, that like if it was not a freeze frame, their eyes would be rolling around all the way. They all almost always have the same look. They look dirty. They look like they're kind of
mentally
unstable, which I think mentally ill is an understatement. But like clearly the people that actually will do the dirty work are people that are on the margins of society, the people that are possibly homeless, that are addicted, that are unhappy people. And this is something that I say a lot on the show. Like the left needs unhappy people because happy people don't engage in revolutionary activities. If you have something to lose, you're not going to throw a brick through a cop car window.
Yeah.
You're just not. You're like, you're like, no, because if I do this, I'm going to get arrested, and I have kids at home or whatever.
Yeah.
So the left needs those people, but just like any other, and I guess for lack of a better term, any terrorist organization, there are the people that actually carry things out who are, you know, it's like a criminal organization. There are people that actually carry things out, which would be the street thugs or whatever. But then there's another level above them that are actually directing them. Those people would likely be considered activists. They would be people that might have some kind of knowledge of leftist theory because they need to be able to tell the people on the ground why they're doing what they're doing, or why they should do what they're doing, even if it's only to rile them up and get them excited. The people that are at the protests kind of directing the crazies. And then above that, there's the people that are funding it. And there's all kinds of I don't know about evidence, but there's a lot of implication that things like NGOs and well-funded organizations actually are doing what they can to support these people, whether it be offering them bail money, like Kamala Harris did. Is it your sense that someone like, I don't think that Kamala Harris got a pardon. Is it your sense that it's possible that the FBI or Cash Patel or whatever would start directing their investigations towards the people that are funding riots, people that are funding these kind of things? Because it does take money to a lot of the people that were in one protest in one part of the country ended up at other protests in other parts of the country. Tim has talked about it. He calls them tourists or whatever.
The BLM snack van showed up.
Exactly my thought. Exactly.
Yeah.
So those people aren't getting, they don't have they're not independently wealthy. They're getting funded. Do you think that it's possible that Cash Patel would use RICO laws to try and actually go after those people, which I would love to see personally?
Yeah. Well, in addition to Cash Patel, the difference between Trump's last term is that we no longer have swamp donkey Bill Barr as the head of the DOJ.
Yeah.
And Bill Barr's dad was the headmaster at Dalton, which is the school that hired Epstein with no college degree as a math teacher. It's like one of the best high schools in the country. All that to say that Bill Barr is definitely a swamp donkey, and he was protecting the swamp donkeys, in my opinion. And now that we have
never heard that one before.
Never heard swamp donkey? Oh yeah. Oh, I've been in DC long enough to know what they look like. So now you have not only the FBI run by Cash Patel, but the DOJ, I think, is going to be working with the FBI in a way that it hasn't in the past. And well, in the past they were working together, but they were working to keep all that stuff under wraps. So,
Julio, dude, what are your thoughts on whether or not the FBI will or should go after the funders of the riots and stuff like that? Because
yeah, I mean, this Trump administration is just way better. In so many ways, but one of the ways is personnel. I mean, Chris Ray was the one that said, oh, yeah, and he initially said, oh, Antifa is not a movement, it's an ideology, which is right. But what an ideology doesn't exist in a vacuum. You have to have people to believe in it and promote it and to like carry out what they believe in. So it's not, it's a movement. It's a real thing. He later, I think it was during congressional testimony that he had to admit, okay, no, it is made up of people, which is like, yeah, no, like, duh. So obviously Kash Patel is not that type. Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, is not like a swamp donkey.
Yeah, I would agree.
So I think those people are going to be in for a rude awakening. Once they do carry out something, obviously to the extent of which they are going to act, that remains to be seen. But I just have a better faith that the federal government's going to do everything that they can to actually dismantle these types of groups, because that's what the people want. I mean, a lot of people, when they experienced 2020, it was a really big wake up call. I mean, we pay taxes because we expect these public services to be operational and not just abandoned when things get tough. And that's exactly what happened in a lot of places. And so, I mean, no one would have thought that Kenosha would have been one of the worst riots for that year in so many ways, right? But that's exactly what happened, right? And because people weren't prepared, you had the Democrat governor, dragging his feet on sending in the National Guard. So it's just, a lot of people are sick and tired of it. I mean, anytime I make jokes about it being riot season, a lot of people are just saying, "No, we're not going through that again," which is understandable, right? I mean, it's not healthy for the country to constantly experience that. But so I think Trump understands that. The Trump administration, the people that he has, understand that. So should something happen, I think the hammer's going to come down on them a lot harder than back in 2020.
For sure, I definitely agree with that. I do think, like the sanctuary city stuff, I agree with you that the immigration issue is going to be the hot button issue, and it'll take some kind of moment, some kind of instance of violence on behalf of ICE or whatever it might be. I think things could change very quickly in those sanctuary cities once this really gets underway.
I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous right now because the main targets right now for these raids are hardened criminals, or gang members, or people that you don't want living next door. And this is something that I've written about on my Substack, where the Latino community is making the same exact mistakes as BLM did back 5 years ago, and that is they have an ends justifying the means policy, and that means they're gonna act out and do whatever. But the difference is, because like, remember what I said, BLM had a 70% approval rating. That's why they were able to kind of carry it on for as long as they were able to. Mass deportations have an over 50% approval rating. So the Latinos who are, burning the American flag. When I was covering protests in LA, a high schooler stabbed another high schooler in the back. Doing the street takeovers, like acting foolish, acting like a bunch of idiots. I'm gonna say it. They're only gonna make mass deportations popular. Like, I mean, why would you wave a Mexican flag or Guatemalan flag in the United States to advocate to stay in the United States? If you were advocating for Mexico to take over America, okay, fine. Like, it's still dumb, but at least that makes sense. But if you're gonna wave a Mexican flag in the United States to say no, we're staying, like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah, is it both your sense that the American people are on the side of deportations?
For now, yes. That might change again if something happens, right? But for now, yes. But and I think, if these protests that I have skin, I literally have skin in the game on this, right? Because I look like them. They're shooting them. They're hurting themselves and the movement by acting that way. They are not making any sort of. They're not winning the public relations battle right now, because they're fighting deportations of people that are like actual hardened criminals. Yes, other people have been swept up just by proxy, but obviously I think as time goes on, yeah, anybody who is in the country legally is gonna be swept up. But you would think that you would want to wait before you start saying, like, we need to stop deportations. Like, really? I want the Nicaragua out of here.
Yeah,
you should too. So it's very interesting, and it's frustrating personally, because what was the stereotype of illegal immigrants prior to all this. It was people that would come in on their own dime, make a better life for themselves, keep their head down, and just provide for their families. That was generally, right? That was the general stereotype. Now it's people that just want handouts. I mean, they get taken care of every step of the way now, from whatever country of origin through Mexico and then the United States. Then they get the hotels and everything, and so they become entitled. That's like one of the biggest things that I've heard recently within the Latino community, within the immigrant community, that these new immigrants, they are totally not like what people were, that have been here for 20, 30 years. They just want handouts. A lot of them, not every single one of them, but just from my reporting, yeah.
Do you think that that's a phenomenon that is because of the last 4 years?
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
think, because it's my sense that the general consensus, like Julio was saying, is that your average, elite, whether they be illegal or legal immigrant, average person, probably from somewhere in South America, they came here, made it here, and they just wanted to come here for, to be able to work and have a better life. And I feel like that has changed significantly because of the border policies of the Biden administration. What's your thought?
Well, we were at the border in March of 2021 outside McAllen at La Jolla. And the thing that I recall the most from that was A, people were coming in through the gaps in the wall, and B, every single person who was coming across the border that we talked to said, why are you coming right now? They said, yeah, because Joe Biden is president now, and they knew that they were going to get free flights to the interior of the country, and that they were going to be able to basically get the handouts that we're talking about. So I think the difference, my question there is, like, can we really blame those people? Like, those people, I'm not saying that they, are like great people. You can, they're breaking the law. But with that being said, the Biden administration put a open for business sign
it was
on the southern border. And they, not only that, they said, hey, and to boot, we're going to give you guys free flights to the interior. We're going to put you up in a hotel for months, and we're going to give you a prepaid credit card and cell phones.
Yeah, no, it was a big pull factor, and that's what made the border crisis so egregious. Just because, yes, but just by the United States being as is, thankfully it's still prosperous mostly. That is going to draw people to the country to come illegally, but then you don't have to. The federal government shouldn't be encouraging that, which is exactly what they were doing. And then, of course, then the sanctuary cities.
And the NGOs, by the way.
Well, right,
like these Catholic NGOs that in every one of these small towns, people might not realize there's no Border Patrol hospital. So this is all like local infrastructure that's taking care of this crisis at the border, of these small towns that are along the border. And it's the NGOs, like I noticed in La Jolla specifically, that there was a Catholic NGO that was literally housing the people at the border until they were able to find whoever they were going to on the interior of the country, and then providing them with everything that they needed to leave the border and go to the interior of the country. So with respect to what you were saying earlier about the NGOs, I think that that's another place to look for why is it that these charities are enabling this kind of stuff?
Is it your understanding that it is mostly charities? Because I feel like it was a lot of actual fronts that USAID were.
Oh yeah,
involved.
for sure. They were.
I'd say it's about 50.
They'd show up with like instructions. So these people were told exactly how to come up through Mexico and exactly what they had to say at the border in order to claim asylum. And that was like the UN had an association, USAID. Certainly, those groups were participating in informing people on how to get across the border and how to game this system properly.
Yeah, I find it. I find the revelations about USAID to be concerning, to say the least. And I think that it's my understanding that they're a significant they were a significant problem as to our whole border conundrum. I've talked about the HHS program, the refugee resettlement program, that would just if you could get to the U.S. border and get across, all you had to do was say you were looking for asylum, which is illegal. You're supposed to go to ports of entry if you're looking for asylum and claim asylum at a port of entry. But if you get across and just look for a border agent to pick you up and say asylum, if you can articulate that one word, then you were set onto the refugee resettlement program, and you were going to get food and water and like you both were saying earlier, a nice hotel room, et cetera. And it doesn't matter if you can speak English or whatever. So
and actually now that you mentioned that, because just yesterday, the Trump administration is canceling the temporary protective status of Haitians that have recently come across, and that I think is actually going to be particularly a reactionary group, because obviously they don't want to go back to Haiti. And I would always hear from Border Patrol agents that if they ever encountered a Mexican, they just give up right away. They're like, oh, okay, fine, like I'll go back to Mexico. They had to be careful with Haitians, because Haitians would fight you.
Really?
Yeah, and actually Todd Bensman, who's a good immigration reporter, and analyst, because you had like Colombia complaining about like, why are Colombians handcuffed, and why are these people handcuffed on these deportation flights. He had a whole bunch of cases where Haitians would, once they realized that they're going back to Haiti, they would destroy the interior of the airplane, and the pilots are like cowering behind the locked door. And then I do remember there was that case when they landed and they got the Haitians out of the plane. They tried to go back in to hijack it, and then another plane came in and they tried to hijack that one. And it was so. I think that has the potential to set up, but again, to your point, is that like, yes, this, I'd say it was about 50-50. Like it's 50% the government directly, and then you have the other half indirectly through the NGOs. But then it's like, if you're being like mostly funded by the government, how can you be a non-government? I mean, it is just by name only, because like, sure,
that's a good, I mean, I saw
like
that.
sure, like obviously it's not a federal employee doing it, but it's federal money anyway. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the point of it, though. The whole they're a non-government organization, but they're getting federal funding, and they're not hired by the government. They're not an actual bureaucracy, and that's all it takes. You can have endless amounts of federal money granted to you or given to you in grants or whatever, and still be considered an NGO, even though you're doing the deeds that the government wants, because the government's paying you the money, and so they, I think that it is a misnomer. So back to the possibilities of unrest because of the summer and Kash Patel and et cetera. Like we were talking earlier about what kind of what the FBI is likely to do. And people in the U.S. say, oh, well, this will be bad, and there'll be this kind of violence, et cetera. If the American people have the stomach for it, I mean, Bukele down in, I think it's El Salvador, right? Mm-hmm. Bukele has a blueprint on how to actually solve your problems when it comes to criminals.
The root causes, so to speak.
It turns out you round them all up and put them in effing jail. And
you don't let them out.
Yeah, you don't let them out. And if you look at like the Trump administration has already started sending people to Gitmo. I mean, that seems like a reasonable solution, in my opinion. If these people are from out of the country, again, not American citizens, doing things like taking over buildings, taking territory, and making essentially what amount to no-go zones. And I want you to talk about, you mentioned that there are already some places that we'd consider no-go zones in California currently, and I will get to that in just a minute. But if that's an option that's on the table, which I don't see a reason why it's not, because again, they're not American citizens, they're here illegally, and they're looking to actually take over American territory. I think that that's a completely reasonable course of action. Do you guys think that the FBI would do that? And then back to tie it into the whole topic of the show, do you think that kind of behavior of actual criminals would spawn significant riots and significant protests and stuff?
Well, I definitely know that. So I was in Guatemala in 2023, and we went to a holding cell there, and I was interviewing like 10 Afghani guys who had come over. They came on a container ship from Africa to Brazil. Then they came up through the Darien Gap, and I was interviewing them in the jail cell. It's like this big open room with bunk beds. And as I was interviewing them, I noticed a group of Colombians and a group of Venezuelans who were like circling around. And like my radar went up of like, I don't want to let these guys, I mean, literally in Guatemala, they were just like, hey, yeah, go into that jail and talk to those people. Like there was nobody who was guarding me or anything like that. And
of course you went in.
Yeah. Yes, because I'm smart like that. And so I actually ended up sprinting out of the jail cell. But all that to say that the people who were coming over previously, like you were saying, they wanted to come and send money back to their families and eventually bring their families up. And now what you have are actual hardened criminals who have been coming over the border for 4 years. And the question is once they start getting rounded up, once they get their backs against the wall, well, what's going to happen? And I think in these sanctuary cities, you're going to see the local governments, the Democrat-run governments, fighting against the federal government coming in, trying to round those people up. And yeah, there could be plenty of chaos and violence.
These local governments have the capacity to fight the federal government and the criminals at the same time.
Well, they don't have AR-15s. Last I
Well, it's interesting because when ICE did that giant sweep in Aurora a couple weeks ago, it actually was a failure because they got a heads up that there was going to be a roundup soon. A lot of them left. So
yeah, the whistleblower.
So right now it appears that they're just going to go underground. They're going to go to ground and just kind of see if they wait it out. But yeah, eventually, that's the concern, especially with leaks, right? That they might want to do like a last stand type situation. And again, this is, I mean, it's hard to truly like game it out because it's so unpredictable. But I think, and that's why. But then that's why it's funny when leading up to Trump getting back into office, you had people saying, the sanctuary city saying, no, we're gonna fight back. We're not gonna allow this. And like Denver's mayor had literally said he's gonna use the police to stop them at the county line. But then as soon as like, okay, well then you're gonna lose your funding, and then they start singing a different tune. So at a minimum, they're gonna just not help. They're not gonna help. They're not gonna Florida, my home state. They just passed a law requiring a certain number of officers within police forces to be ready to be assigned to help ICE, and really that. Obviously, the federal government has vast resources. Obviously, it has the ability to carry out a lot of removals. But in order to really reach numbers that people really want to see, it's gonna have to fall on the states too to actually do more than just not get in the way. They actually have to go out and help because they do have the local intel. They do know their communities better. But obviously, not every single state is going to do that, right? I can see Texas doing that and other red states, but. It's gonna take more than the federal government to reach those numbers.
Yeah, I have a friend who was a prosecutor in a county surrounding DC in one of these sanctuary counties, and it's just he was infuriated. He originally was like came into that job coming from the left, and he immediately changed his perspective when he saw these MS-13 gang members who they knew that they were in jail, and they were told it was policy not to inform ICE that they were in a holding cell. And so the MS-13 dudes would then get let back out into the streets without federal charges, without ICE coming in, and they would be like laughing at the prosecutors being like, oh yeah, see, they let me right back out. So that's obviously gonna, I think if you use my buddy as a proxy, he went from being a lefty to changing his views completely because he was like, this is completely insane. So you can only have that insanity persist for so long before normal people are just like, yo, this is absolutely wild.
I agree with you, but doesn't that take the experience? And when I say the experience, I don't know that the average person that would go ahead and say, oh, get on the internet and say, oh, this is messed up. Yeah. They don't experience, they don't see that, they don't have the actual realistic experience of it. To them, it's just, it's just another anecdote, isn't it?
Yeah, it's your typical lefty who's like, they just do it because it's virtuous. And that goes back into the peer pressure associated with BLM. With the immigration issue, unless you've been down to the border and you've seen the situation down there, it wasn't until they started arriving by the tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands in all of these left-wing cities. I think my favorite article of the last 4 years, it was a New York Post article about all of these Williamsburg residents in New York, which is in Brooklyn. It's like more expensive than Manhattan now. They were infuriated because their dog park was being used for to house these migrants. And so it wasn't until that finally happened, once they were actually in their backyard, that they were like, wait a second. So I do think that the issue has gotten so bad where average people are like, okay, well, maybe virtue, it's a little bit different when actually the pragmatic reality is that your own city is getting destroyed by a massive flood of people who, just want to stay in the Roosevelt Hotel.
There was a video that was circulating a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was an AJ Plus podcast from where this interview was taking place, and this woman, she was saying that Mexico can't absorb all those deportees. They can't absorb all those millions of people that are coming back all of a sudden. I was thinking, whoa,
You don't say.
Like, really? Like that's interesting. Thank you. Thank you for making that point. And that's why it's also funny because you had like Mexico's president as well referring to the Mexicans that are in the United States as Mexicans, right? They just view them as
Senorita Scheinbaum.
right. Yeah. So it's just funny that, but they're Mexicans, but we want to keep them in the United States, and obviously I think that's just because of the remittances. Mexico's economy is like there's a lot of money in that too. So that's why there's so much pushback. It's not just because Trump is being racist.
Well, yeah, I mean every country that has a sizable population or a sizable plurality of their population in the United States working and sending American dollars back, that's a significant economic incentive, isn't it?
Yeah, and actually the bill that the Florida State House passed, that it didn't. The bill that Governor DeSantis initially proposed, that it actually it wasn't a tax on remittances. It was requiring people who were sending remittances back to provide proof of U.S. citizenship at these financial institutions. It's a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, that for whatever reason, and again, I think it's because the money talks, that wasn't included in the final bill. So they're promising that they're going to address that later on down the road. But the fact that we don't even tax remittances is
24% of El Salvador in 2023. 24% of El Salvador's GDP was remittances.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
But you want to, I mean, you want to fund all your little pet projects. There you go.
Yeah. Well, I lived in Amman, Jordan, in the Middle East. 1/6 of their GDP is foreign aid from the United States.
Yeah.
So, I mean, which is not saying much. It's not like they have a crazy big GDP, but it's like $600 million a year.
Yeah.
And I mean, before, aside from Afghanistan and now Ukraine, the number one recipient of military aid from the United States was Israel, and number two was Egypt. It was like $3 billion and $2 billion. So it's crazy that you would have a conflict over there, and not only are we funding one side, we're funding both sides.
And to play both, so we come out on top.
Yeah, I guess so.
I mean, it's
or American citizens just end up on the bottom.
yeah, it's typical that the U.S. does, funds both sides of whatever conflict, and
yeah, because I'm getting the emails. You gotta file your taxes, and I don't really want to actually. I even more so. I don't really want to.
Really?
I don't want to do TurboTax right now, or
Yeah.
H&R Block or whatever.
yeah, I imagine the average American, right now they're hoping for some kind of movement on taxes because with all the talk of the IRS. But that's another topic for another time. So the riot season that we're looking at this year, it kind of feels like. Well, I mean, clearly you're hoping for something interesting, huh?
I'm bored, man. I've been bored for a while.
I just pretend to be in retirement.
Yeah, this guy. Every time I post about it, he goes, "Oh, I'm retired." It's like, stop freaking lying.
It's like Tom Brady,
You're retired because it's the winter.
Yeah.
It's just like it's like football.
I mean, yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, I was cold covering the inauguration protest, and that was like absolute, and nothing happened on that, and so it was kind of.
Yeah, I mean, well, that
was surprising. I was surprised by that.
Well, it was really cold.
Yeah,
it was really cold. Like I know people were talking about security with Trump, I think that had something to do with it, but also it was really really cold.
It was cold. It was the coldest it's been in DC since 1988. Is what I saw.
Right. Yeah, because it was the wind chill too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people were making a whole big deal about it because they were like, "Oh, look at Donald Trump is weak and he's a pussy, and we're gonna go ahead and talk about him because it's cold out and blah blah blah."
But it's like I don't see you out there.
Yeah,
I'm not saying
Obama's first one was pretty cold. I was there. It's actually
because you were lib.
I ended up yep.
Yeah, because you were open change, and it's like okay.
Yeah, hope open change, folks. And nope, nothing changed.
No.
But I was at Obama's first inauguration, and it was definitely cold, but nobody shot Obama in the ear months
prior to
before.
That, yeah.
And Reagan was the last time that it was inside, and that was a couple of years after Reagan's assassination attempt.
Yeah.
So even if it were inside for those reasons, I would say that that's justified.
Yeah.
So everyone's like, "Oh, he's a wuss." It's like, well, same thing with the Bible. So St. John's Church that whole weekend.
Oh yeah.
Before that, like all of the left-wing media, CNN, were saying, "Oh, Trump is such a wuss for going into the bunker," and it's like the Secret Service were up on the roof, and I've talked to guys who were there that night, and they were like ready for them to overrun the front lawn, and if that had to happen, then there would have been
A lot of people that took rounds.
Yes, exactly.
Because the Secret Service, if you
People don't realize how close that was to happening.
Yeah.
I mean, the Secret Service was overwhelmed. They're getting bricks thrown. There were dozens of them that were injured. And it's like, isn't that warranted to put the president into the bunker? Like, isn't that what...
I mean, well, at that point, the president doesn't have a choice.
Yeah,
There is a point,
exactly.
there is a level, a certain threshold that once it's met, the president doesn't get to tell Secret Service what to do anymore. The Secret Service is like, no, Mr. President, we're running the show right now until the situation is under control again. But the leftist media isn't going to ever. I mean, that was their.
I mean, that was an insurrection.
Yeah, clearly.
That was an attempt.
Well, I would argue that neither of them were an insurrection.
Well, no, I know, but just using the crying Adam Kinzinger's emotional outburst. Because you can say the same thing about the Portland courthouse, because it's a rebellion against the federal government. Obviously not the Capitol building, but it's still federal government property with federal agents.
And how many nights was the Portland courthouse under siege? And siege is legitimate. They were
over 100.
Yeah, it was for a while, and they continued, because once they were done with the federal courthouse, they went back to targeting the Portland police precincts.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So it was it went for very.
I mean, it was crazy. Like straight up garbage fires every single night. I'd be like,
well, that's just Portland.
I'd be like sitting around a garbage fire, like talking to these dudes, like trying to get some semblance of why they were out there. And it's like literally we're right in front of the Portland courthouse, on the street in front of it, and we're around a garbage. I definitely lost years off my life breathing in whatever plastic was burning. And I'm not even kidding you. There was a moment where in the plaza, so they would use saws, like actual metal saws, to saw open the fence.
Yeah.
They'd rip the fence open, and they go into the plaza and light a garbage fire. And it's like the first night that I was there, a dude threw a plastic fan into the flame, and I was like, I guess that's a new definition of fanning the flames there.
Well, when I was there, because people would try to, because as I found out, they had the cops had slits, because obviously the whole thing was locked down, but they had a slit, so they would shoot pepper balls at anybody who had broken through the fence.
Oh, I got hit with a couple of those.
So people would go into the fence and would basically just try to do like a 100-yard dash. Try just to mess with the
just to see if they could do it.
Just to see if they could try to run through the gauntlet without getting shot.
It was like the idiot Olympics. I remember Shelby had the funniest. It was Shelby Talcott, who was out there when we were working at the Daily Caller. There was a guy who had a lacrosse stick, and he like caught one of the tear gas canisters and he threw it back over with his lacrosse stick, and he like raised it as if he had just scored a goal and won the championship, and everyone was like, yeah, it's like the idiot Olympics.
Freaking lax bros, man. We get it. You played lacrosse. Right?
The idiot Olympics is good. But if there isn't, or if the FBI doesn't have the wherewithal to actually go after the NGOs, do you guys have a sense that there is still that kind of, the kind of infrastructure necessary to gin up the kind of riots that we saw in 2020? Because again, I don't think that the motivation is there. I think that it would take something like George Floyd being killed to get that, and I think that it was unique. Like you said, we mentioned COVID, and we mentioned that, and I don't think the left has that kind of influence anymore either. I think the American people have got a sense that the left is actually a problem, and that's why you see so many people that are no longer afraid to say, yeah, you know what, I think Donald Trump is okay. Not even just to be like, oh, I'm a big Trump supporter, but yeah, he's probably not a Nazi, which is now a brave which used to be a brave statement, but now it's I think that it's actually fairly normal.
Now it's just Elon Musk.
Exactly.
I think at a minimum, I think I would say the motivation is there, because we've already seen protests, and some of them have gotten out of hand. I mean, Glendale, right next to Phoenix, someone stole a cop car and took it for a joyride during one of these things. So it's not to the level of 2020, and I don't want to make a hard prediction of like, yes, it is going to. But the conditions are there. The conditions are there for something to kind of ignite. I think, as I was saying earlier, with how the current protests are right now, and with how public opinion is not with them, the majority of public opinion, they have an uphill battle. So it would have to be something particularly egregious.
Yeah, you would need another chaotic event to take place, like maybe not necessarily something like COVID, but you have to ask the question of how much money is at stake, and these people who have been running the government on behalf of the Uniparty for 40 years. I mean, they have done seriously bad things.
Wait, what?
And,
huh? And the government?
Oh yeah, no, the government.
Oh damn, okay.
And that's the problem that I've always had with.
I thought we were the Avengers.
With the conversation around, it's like either America is inherently the best country ever, or they have committed sins in the past and they're terrible. Well, you can have the greatest country ever that also has done not so great things.
Yeah.
And I now see more political will on the right towards understanding that. And I think it has evolved now to the point where like people who voted for Trump are ready to see where the bodies were buried. And that's what I'm looking forward to because, you know, ever since I was a kid, I've been looking into the Kennedy thing and it stinks. That's to say the least. Pretty sure George Bush was there in Dallas that day.
George Bush himself.
He was, dude.
Sir, we lost
Arbor Bush said they were there.
There's a second shooter on the plaza.
How old was George Bush then?
So he became, he was in his 20s, and then right after that, he became the youngest director of the CIA. And according to the record, George Bush was not in the CIA at the time that the Kennedy shooting took place, but there are documents that were released.
Bush was the second shooter.
I don't think that he was, but he would be like the guy who was overlooking things to make sure they went.
Oh, so you're saying he was
make
up
sure
in the
they
book
went
depository?
I don't even think Oswald was in the book depository. I think it was one of the guys who was a lookalike. There were multiple Oswald lookalikes, and I don't even think he ever even spent one shift in that book depository. And he was definitely in the theater where they found him afterwards, but he was bewildered. And I think if he had been in the depository, you wouldn't have seen that reaction from him. So I think
you're really into the whole CIA kind of did the Kennedy thing.
CIA, the mob, rogue elements of both organizations. But I do think if George Bush was there, then maybe it wasn't as rogue as we thought.
I don't know that I have an opinion on whether actually I think that I do.
I'll be the Norman Rockwell painting guy just standing up. I don't care. I do not care about this right now.
I mean, not only
it's interesting to read about. Don't get me wrong, but it's not. I don't care.
I think that I do agree with you. I think that when it comes to the average American, I think that whoever actually did kill JFK, I don't think that the average American is going to be like, oh, this is life shattering. This changes.
Well, maybe
my
to
opinion.
the boomers because they love them so much.
I mean, maybe it's their generation. They remember it when they were little and stuff. But and I think that everyone kind of agrees that the CIA has done nefarious things for just about its whole existence, and they probably wouldn't put it past. I mean, look, after Bay of Pigs, when Kennedy was like, "Yo, we got to get out. These guys got to go." CIA's like, someone's got to go. I think that's
someone is.
Not to mention Operation Northwoods,
where
they wanted to use remote-controlled planes to blow up buildings and catalyze people to invade Cuba.
Yeah, I mean, they were legit after Castro. And
hey man, those cigars are to die for. So I'm just saying.
Well, my question is with respect to Epstein, how is it that we have gone through all this time and not a single person who was on that client list has been prosecuted?
Well, not only that, but I guess I agree with you, but not only that, the fact that the judge said no, it's too volatile to release.
Yeah, well, because you had Acosta.
If we tell everybody,
wait, what do you
then
mean?
you guys are going to be real busy for the next year.
Well, you remember, and that's the distinction that I'm making between Trump 1.0 and Trump 2.0. You had Alex Acosta, who was the prosecutor in Florida, who gave Epstein that sweetheart deal where he was technically in jail, but he could get massages while he was in there.
What kind of masseuse are you?
And not to mention, that was in 2008, and then all these people like Bill Gates are still visiting with him afterwards. I'm pretty sure if you get accused of that kind of crime, even if you got a sweetheart deal, I wouldn't be hanging out with that dude.
I mean,
right?
I wouldn't hang out with Epstein at all.
I mean, I think if you look at it in that way, then you're like, okay, if Bill Gates was one of those people, there are a lot of really powerful people whose names are on that list.
Did Clinton's tour of Africa with Epstein? Was that before or after?
Clinton's tour of Africa was in the 90s.
That was in the 90s. Okay.
And that was with Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker. Which is like, wait, what? Chris Tucker was on the plane. What are you? What the heck?
Yeah, Chris Tucker was there. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris Tucker was on the plane. Yeah.
That film Rush Hour 5.
Was Jackie Chan with him too?
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Don't nobody understand the words that come out of your mouth.
It's a great movie though.
Chris, she's only 5.
No. Man. All right, so
I'm not saying he is. I'm just making jokes here. Just to be clear.
I mean, the thing is, when you're talking about Epstein or Epstein Island and stuff, that kind of stuff, you assume the worst.
I was talking about that in 2015. I was like, there's an island, this guy named Jeffrey Epstein. I was telling all my friends from home. I remember Thanksgiving 15 and 16.
How'd you find out about it?
Because I was on the dark corners of the internet where that kind of conversation takes place. And people noticed that there were like...
Do you mean 4chan by
I was about to say 4chan.
No comment. I don't reveal my sources. But all these Anons were like, not only is there this island...
You're talking about Anons,
not only is there this island, there's this woman who went by the name of Ray Chandler. And look, I don't want to... I hope I don't get like a...
Do I need to step away?
I don't want a cruise missile to come through.
Safe inside the building.
Yeah.
Once you walk outside, I make.
But she had photos that were tagged on Epstein Island of a surveillance system that showed people. It was very hard to tell because it was pixelated and black and white, but naked people inside of what looked like a prison cell, and the people went through her Instagram and they started looking at Epstein Island on Google Earth, and they're like, why are there industrial ventilation systems on this island? What is this temple? And all my buddies are like, you're crazy. And then like a couple years later, I was like, I told you guys.
Who's crazy
I
now?
told you.
That's got to be, I mean, that's got to be a real heavy kind of I told you so.
Yeah. Well, because nobody wants to believe that it's real. And that's ultimately, and I don't blame people for being like, look, I just want to go about my life. And I don't care. But like, if you look at the Catholic Church, for example, if it was not only a place where that kind of stuff was overlooked, but it was actually that if you share that dark secret with somebody else, then that actually allows you to be elevated within that hierarchy, because the only person you can trust is somebody who you have dirt on. So I think that if you use that as a proxy, then we've seen something similar happen within the darker elements of our government. And, the people who were the ones participating in this kind of stuff are the ones who were elevated through the hierarchy, because you can trust somebody when you have dirt on them. And that's what it's all about.
I mean, you do mention, we talked about a little bit about the Epstein situation, and it is interesting that the American people, specifically the people that are prone to get excited in ways that you guys cover.
What are you talking about? Me?
It is interesting that kind of stuff doesn't really motivate most people. You'll hear people talk about the wealthy and the 1%, but since, Occupy Wall Street, the behavior or misbehavior of the ultra rich is not enough to get the average person to get up off the couch. I mean, obviously some people will, because you've got people like Luigi that went and killed a dude that was, in the grand scheme of things, not really particularly rich. Like, you'll hear them say, oh, the billionaires. This guy was worth maybe $40 million. And there is a significant difference between 40 million and $1 billion. But, the billionaires and the top 0.001%, those are the people that end up getting discussed, but then they go and they kill the people that are worth 10, 20, 30
Essentially
million.
like the middle management in the grand scheme of things.
It was very, very convenient the way that all went down.
Oh, boy,
I'm not saying.
Here we go. Now
I'm not saying.
George Bush was
we
there
were doing
too, or
MK Ultra in the 70s. And I mean, I'm just saying, with whether it's Thomas Crooks or Luigi Mangione, it's not necessarily about whether or not the people being targeted are on the left or the right. It's about sowing the seeds of chaos. Because if you want to rule over one of the biggest democracies in the world, well, then you have to keep the population divided. And so that's what I've been saying since Trump got in.
Hold on. Democrats are saying we're no longer a democracy.
Well,
because Elon Musk is cutting
that's
waste at
that goes into my point, though, that I think, with Trump back in office and MAGA now being mainstream, I do think it behooves the right to a certain extent to reach out that hand and have the conversation despite the fact, look, I get it. I got dragged plenty of times. Yes, I've been through the mud, but you know, I'm still willing to say, hey, well, you used to think that, you're an idiot. Yeah, you called me all these names, but like, let's have a conversation now. Let's turn a new side of the coin here. Come on.
Well, I mean, so are you saying that there's more to the Luigi story than just Luigi was inspired to go after a rich guy? Because if you look at the sentiment that the left's the arguments the left makes and things that you see, there are people that are calling for the death of Elon Musk because he's assumed
Just
to
saw
be
it out in the streets 2 nights ago.
because he's assumed to be somehow in a puppet master of Donald Trump, which is personally I think it's ridiculous, but and there are people that are always calling for the death of billionaires and the expropriation of their property because they're an easy scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
Even though people don't seem to understand that, like, the billionaires that own multiple companies, like, they're the ones that they're the reason why why the people that work for them have jobs, right? Like, I firmly believe that it takes people, and it's not a situation where everyone's a blank slate and anyone that went through the same circumstances would be able to do what Bezos or Musk or the Waltons or whichever billionaire you decide you dislike. It's the decisions those people make, and that is unique to those people. It's not the way the left kind of characterizes it, where anybody that was in that position would do that. And so it doesn't matter who it is, that the circumstances created the person. I believe the person creates the circumstances. And that being the case, I think that the way that the left portrays the wealthy and billionaires and by extension millionaires, because again, the way that people that are motivated by this stuff, they perceive it as if he's richer than me, or it looks like he's rich, then he qualifies. So, like, I'm not even a millionaire, but there are people that are like, oh, well, Phil's rich, so it's okay. It's bad that I was talking about the possibility of the Doge dividend, and people are like, no, well, it's easy for you to say you're rich, and it's like, well, I mean, I'm not broke, but I'm also not a millionaire, or I don't have millions of dollars in the bank, but to the people that are upset that I would say the Doge dividend is bad, those people are looking at me and they're saying, well, he's a rich guy, and they classify me with the CEO of the healthcare company that got murdered. And it's like he's worth 40 million. And even that is peanuts compared to someone that's worth one individual $1 billion. Never mind someone like Bezos or Musk that are worth, whatever, 75 or 100 billion or whatever they happen to be worth. And I think the motivation that those people have, or the driver, is just envy, and I think that's enough to spawn people to do some.
It's been put on steroids too, because now with these social media platforms, you can literally look at the life of every billionaire and every multimillionaire celebrity, and they're putting filters on their content, and it's like the grass has always been greener on the other side, but now you're getting slapped over the head with that greener grass every single day, depending on what your social media feed looks like. But regardless, everybody's presenting their own lives in the most positive light, and that actually is not what their lives really look like. But what you're presented with on your feed as you go through is just, all these people who are richer than you, who have more than you, who have a better job or whatever it is. And so it's like there's a spiritual sickness that pervades across both sides of the political spectrum, where these.
So we don't want to get down with the sickness.
Yeah, yeah. But I do think, like, and not to mention like pharmaceuticals and the fact that, like, more people have prescriptions for things like Adderall and Xanax, and like it's pretty easy to like go down rabbit holes when you're jacked up on some Adderall, right? So I don't think
I don't know. I wouldn't know, Richie. Would you?
I've tried it before. Yeah,
it sounds like you're speaking from experience.
I dabbled.
Here.
Yeah, I got down some rabbit holes.
That's why we love you. Because you're Arch Steve-O. That's you're Arch Steve-O.
Something,
I'm retired.
I mean, it takes a little extra something to stay up all night chasing after crazy people that are throwing Molotov cocktails, right?
That was mostly nicotine pouches, actually.
I was pure adrenaline, baby.
Nicotine's a hell of a drug, man. I miss it.
It is. You got it right here. Mellow.
But so, Julio, what are your thoughts on, the narrative that's being spun and how about the wealthy or Musk or I think what are perceived to be wealthy, really, I guess it more boils down to income inequality, because relative income differences are far more impactful than anything else. Like if you have a destitute poor population, and then there's a dude that makes enough money to pay for food, and everyone around him doesn't have enough money to pay for food, that dude might as well be a billionaire, and the rest of the people around him are going to hate his guts because he can pay for, even if he's living in you could be living in a mud hut, but it's a mud hut that's got a bag of rice in it every day, and the people around him don't have a mud hut or don't have a bag of rice every day. Well, they're going to look at him and they're going to be like, I'm going to kill him because he has more than me. And in the United States, nobody in the United States is poor by any kind of
global
historical standards. Definitely not by global standards. You make $1 a day in some parts of the world, and that's not even, or that's that's what gets you out of abject poverty. I think the UN has said that by 2030 there will be no human beings in abject poverty, or a vanishingly small amount. The ability of markets to solve abject poverty is no longer in question. But here in the United States, you got people that are like, well, I can't pay my rent in New York, and I can't pay for the new iPhone. I've got an old, weird, broken down phone from 5 years ago that, the camera doesn't work or whatever. And so I feel like I'm poor, especially compared to people that have so much. And those people that are actually not really struggling to feed themselves will still feel like, I struggle to pay my bills, so I'm justified in hating people that have more than me. Do you feel like that's enough to get people into the streets, or what point do you feel like it actually becomes a problem where people are going to say, I'll go and I'll go out and riot? Or is it just the temperature when it's warm enough and they're bored?
I mean, I think it's a combination of that, because when Mangione was being extradited from, Pennsylvania, right? You had like 2 people show up. So there's a lot of online support, and I think it's just, in today's day and age, most people think that's enough to just say
the anons.
Well, not even anons.
Not just, but
not even the anons, but
people from behind a keyboard.
Yeah, just people from behind a keyboard, and obviously it's not just with that specific example, but that was a good example because there was such widespread support online, and so I don't know how that would translate necessarily into protest. Maybe if he's found guilty, okay, then in that case maybe.
Well, right? I got my broken iPhone right here. I'm not sitting on my high horse like Phil over there, Mr. Rich Man. I think we're gonna have to occupy the compound.
I don't know. You have 3. You have 3.
I do have 3 lenses.
You have 3 lenses.
It is a max.
Okay.
It is a max, but it is broken. All right,
a small one, man.
All right, and I got to pay rent in DC. Not to mention the taxes and the parking tickets.
You've chosen to pay rent.
Yeah, well,
so you've chosen poorly.
That's true. 16 years. But now they're trying to levy my taxes because of all my parking tickets. They're going to take my refund.
Wait, how many parking tickets do you have?
Well, I got that
to
car.
Get the government after him.
I got my car out of the state. It's mothballed somewhere else, and I bought another car. But there are thousands of dollars. There's some speed cameras involved. I've been trying my best. I may or may not have.
You're not telling a sympathetic story.
Yeah. Well, no, but here's one thing I will say to the people.
I'm sure you don't need to talk to your lawyer.
If you guys, if even just 1% of the people watching this show would take it upon themselves to go out, find the speed camera closest to their house, and throw some spray paint on that thing. I'm not saying I've done that. And I'm not saying that the camera next to my house has been raised up multiple times over the last 5 years.
We hear
Get it higher and higher.
But
am I not supposed to do that? I'm not supposed to. I can advocate for spray painting speed cameras, right? Is that allowed?
No.
Okay. Well, I just did.
Okay. Well,
that is oppression right there. They have stop sign cameras in DC now.
Look,
you don't stop for 3 seconds, $100 ticket.
I am opposed to all forms of traffic cameras that are just giving out.
Let's make it hard for them.
That are just giving out tickets. I'm also opposed to discussing vandalism of public property on the internet.
We do not low-level crime. If it's under $1,500 in damage, it's not a felony.
Oh my
God, okay.
Hey,
Enough.
yeah,
We
all
got to
right.
move on.
All right, enough from Mr. Retired over here.
Yeah, you're going to be retired to
Gitmo.
to some kind of public service to pay your debt to
I
society.
don't even like airplanes anymore anyway. I don't need to be.
Oh my gosh, that was my because I fly when I lived here in the area. I flew out of DCA all the time, not knowing that. Oh, there's actually all these helicopter routes right around DCA. It's like,
Yeah,
whose idea was that?
the Pentagon's.
Yeah, yeah, clearly.
Apparently. So yeah, I guess the FBI, you know, with Kash Patel being the new head of the FBI, I would like to see actual attacking, like going after people that are actually movement on the crime syndicates here, and then also the NGOs that fund the type of behavior that leads to riots. But I don't know that.
I don't want that.
Well, I mean,
I don't want that to go away. It's called job security.
It's Julio's livelihood.
Yeah, what are you trying to do? We're trying to put me out of a job here?
I'm trying to save people. I'm trying to save people's property.
Look, there's no more border crisis. There's no more riots. Julio's going to be out in the streets.
I gotta go. I gotta go to South Africa now.
He's going to be asking for some change.
You're gonna
Spare some change.
You have to start writing more frequently as opposed to going out and getting weird. But I mean, that's the goal of the new administration, right? To have society not be so volatile, and I think that most Americans kind of want that too. I mean, wouldn't that be something that aside from like the adrenaline junkies such as yourself, you know,
normal people? Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's what people voted for, because that was one of the biggest lies with the Biden administration, right? Is that it's a return to normalcy, it's a return to we're done with the chaos of Trump, and it's what are you talking about? Things are continuing to go. Like, sure, it's not the high energy riots of 2020, but there's like this low intensity that's like just under the crust that you can feel, that you can see. I mean, I just saw like today, there's a video of a guy on the metro in DC. He's getting jacked for his Canada Goose jacket. And then with like the Daniel Penny thing, and of course there was, well, you just don't look at them in the eye. You just avoid them. It's like, well, that doesn't always happen.
Did either of you guys go to New York for any of the protests after Daniel Penny was found not guilty?
No, I wish I did.
And that's an interesting. There's a lot of parallels between Daniel Penny and Kyle Rittenhouse.
Yeah, well, the reason I asked,
So you hate Daniel Penny too?
I don't hate anybody. I don't hate anybody. All right.
well, the reason I
I think
asked
it's his fault.
is because
I was on the stand. All right.
that's something that you would have assumed would have set people off if the energy was still there.
So there were protests in the immediate aftermath of that incident, and they did kind of get out of hand. But you're right, it didn't reach to the same level as New York did back in 3 years prior. So. I think.
Do you think that it was because? Do you think it was because there's a different temperature in the country? Or do you think that it was because it wasn't a police officer that actually did it? Do you think it was because the people that were
a combination of that, but also because, like I said, BLM they went from 70% approval rating in Pew Research in what was it, I think April or June of 2023. It dropped down to like 50%. I still think that's way too high.
50%.
50%, yeah. So I mean that's a pretty significant drop. So I think.
And that was this year. Or last year?
No. When it was like right after the Daniel Penny.
Okay.
So, but and that kind of bore itself out because the BLM protests after that incident weren't nearly as big. They did get a little ruckus. They get a little rowdy, and they went down into the subway and they started acting up. But yeah, if that happened in 2020, I think for sure New York would have gotten another round of things, and because I mean. A lot of the air was taken out after Derek Chauvin got convicted, because people forget that there was that case in Columbus literally that day when the verdict was announced, that LeBron James so hopefully opined on, where the girl was about to stab another girl and a white police officer stopped her from doing that. And I was thinking, oh shoot, I might have to go to Columbus, Ohio now. Nothing happened. Yeah. And so there's been multiple cases.
Is that the basketball player?
LeBron James,
The
yes.
Asian cop who got attacked. And then,
No.
No, there was. It was a. I think it was a party and a black girl was trying to stab another black girl.
Yeah. And so
There's video of it. It's pretty.
yeah, the body camera footage. Yeah. So there have been cases since then where again it's either a justified police action or unjustified police action, and nothing's happened. I mean, the closest thing like to protest was was that case in Memphis when that guy got
they beat him.
basically beat him to death, but it was 5 black cops because it's Memphis, right? That's just the city's demographics, and so there were protests, and I covered that, but nothing crazy.
Well, the one ingredient that we do have though is the economic
Trump.
disparity that you were talking about earlier. I think it's really interesting that Trump used this term "golden age" because the term "gilded age," the last time that the separation between the rich and the poor was as wide as it is now, was during the Gilded Age, and that was coined by Mark Twain because what it referred to was something that was painted with gold paint, but not actually gold on the inside. So it looked like it was gold, but all of these people were, the railroad barons and all that were making tons of money, and the worker was totally destitute. And that was the last time that we had a major paradigm shift in the United States political landscape. People forget that William Jennings Bryan in 1896 was the Democratic nominee. He lost to William McKinley, but he ran on this speech where he stole the nomination as a 36-year-old at the DNC. And he said, you will not crucify the American worker on the cross of gold. And he wanted to go to the silver standard. And that was what initiated.
Is that the guy that was giving away free silver?
I don't know if he gave it away. I do know, like, William Jennings Bryan, he was very much a populist figure.
Yeah.
And he initiated the transition of the Democrat Party. They had lost for like 40 years straight ever since the Civil War. He initiated the transition of the Democrat Party from the party of the South to the party of the working class. And so the Democrat Party that FDR inherited by the...
Why does he look like Brian Stelter?
Who, William Jennings Bryan? Oh, I thought William Jennings Bryan, he was this awesome populist, and then I found out that he supported the Spanish-American War, and he was a total war hawk. And,
Some things never change.
Oh, he was Secretary of State for Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson was literally the worst president in history.
Yep. So
He was a big fan of the cinema.
I mean, well, so you were...
I'm glad you got that.
but we're in the midst of another paradigm shift, and as the stance shift, I mean, I think that's the interesting thing about being in DC right now is that it's difficult to even put your finger on what a Republican or a Democrat is these days because there's such a broad coalition.
Well, no,
Trump
Democrats are wrong.
Okay, all right, that's
So if
I'm
you're
registered independent, so
If you're wrong, that's how you can tell someone's a Democrat.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So do you get, Julio, do you get a sense that there's a similar paradigm shift that the arguments now are less Democrat and Republican and more populist and establishment?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, to a point, yes, just because Trump's recent victory, right? I mean, it was they expanded their electorate. All the border counties in Texas, except for 2, went for Republican, which has never happened before, I don't think, or at least it hasn't happened in a very long time. And even those blue counties, they didn't go as blue as they went back in 2020. So I think to a point, yes, and that's just because everything is being turned on its head, especially in the aftermath of 2020 with COVID and with kind of that unrest that really did wake people up. And it was shocking to me too, right? Because you would think that something like that wouldn't be allowed to happen, and in terms of the reaction to COVID and reaction to BLM and BLM itself, and then of course the election of 2020 that was just another the aftermath, that was another firebomb. So yeah, I mean the coalitions and kind of how we view what's a typical Democrat and what's a typical Republican has shifted quite a bit. I don't know if it's to the extent of like. It's like, oh, we don't really know. I have a pretty good idea. I mean, you ask anybody, how many genders are there? I mean, that answer alone will give you a good idea.
6,547.
I say 69. But no.
So there is currently I'm glad you mentioned that because there is currently brought up the gender topic, not because I specifically want to talk about gender or whatever, but because there is a a fight in the Democrat Party as to who should be in control, whether it be and I saw Jeet Hare was tweeting about this. Not that I'm a fan.
No, I know, but he's a good indicator. He's a good indicator.
And he is of the opinion, and so are people like Crystal Ball, which she's a clown, but Crystal Ball and people over at the Majority Report, they think that it's time for like the DSA to run the Democrats, and that there should be more far
double
left.
down on
Exactly, and it's my and the argument that they make is, well, the reason that Trump won is because actual progressives stayed home. They didn't like Joe Biden because Joe Biden wasn't hard enough on Israel, and Joe Biden supported Israel over Gaza. And because of that, actual progressives didn't go and go to the polls to vote. And so that's why Donald Trump won. I think that's complete horseshit. Yeah. I don't think that that's true at all. But that's the way that they cope with losing.
David Hogg just got a job at the DNC.
Yeah.
That tells you everything. It's like, but you can only continue to lose for so long before you're like, all right, we need a new playbook here.
So how do you have the sense that the radicals, who are the people that also would be likely to be out in the street, protesting, the DSA members, the communists, the actual communists, because you see the overlap of communists in Antifa. They'll call themselves
anarcho-communism.
Yeah, anarcho-communists. They'll call themselves anarchists, but as soon as there's a government program, they're like, I'm all for it.
So statist anarcho-communist.
It's such a ridiculous concept. But those are the people that are most frequently out there,
right?
As members of Antifa and out there protesting. Do you get a sense that they have the mojo to win the Democrats? And if they do win the Democrats, get control, if they become the influential wing of the Democrat Party, do you think that would mean that there would be more protests on the ground, more kind of riots and stuff?
Honestly, I don't know. I truly don't know, just because I think I don't see how that more radical side of things can completely take over the DNC. It's kind of happening.
I got 3 letters for you. AOC.
Well, right, but she became party insider. I mean, she plays the game. She plays the game, and that's what you do in DC, right? Yeah. So you can only go for so long, and that's why a lot of people or a lot of like her original fan bases.
I would push back on that and use how long it took Bernie to be. How long Bernie was an outsider to the Democrats before it became very clear to his base and people that he was actually an insider. Because
he got sandbagged in 2 different elections.
So. He was the most effective communicator for the Democrats prior to the progressives prior to AOC, and obviously he doesn't have a spine, so he just knelt down for Hillary Clinton.
Okay.
And
I resent that statement. I resent it very much.
I don't care what he resents. It's true.
I didn't bend down. I just was sitting in a chair.
Yeah, bitch. But it's clear that he didn't have the ability to stand up and say, no, these are the principles that I actually do believe in. But he was still the person, and still is the person that people like Crystal Ball point to. People like Kyle Kalinske, they point to Bernie and they point to his politics.
Yeah.
Do you guys think that someone that has those kind of politics that has a little bit more of a spine could actually step in and take over the Democrats? And not that I think that would be a good thing for the Democrats, but do you think that the Democrats would fall in line behind that person? Because they need donations, and like the wealthy people that have been propping the Democrats up. They're not going to be into Bernie saying we need a tax.
Get all the pennies out of your vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, we need a tax on unrealized capital, on unrealized gains, right? Like if they're going to start saying you have to sell property to pay taxes on your existing property, all the rich people are going to be like, nope.
Well, the other problem with that is that Trumpism and Trump's brand of populism took the wind out of the sails of the Bernie wing of the Democrat Party, because if you listen to a Bernie speech from 2016, he was saying that we shipped all our jobs overseas to China. And so Trump was able to capture that working class blue collar voter.
And now it's China.
Yeah, so I think the people who support that radical agenda are not your average everyday Americans who are going to go to the polls in great numbers. They're like young people with blue hair.
I mean, I'm fine with Democrats being in chaos. Dems in disarray. I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, they're going to figure something out eventually.
Dude, Dave Chappelle.
No.
Dave Chappelle.
No, he's too anti-transgender.
Well,
not even that. He's made too many jokes about that. There's no way.
I'm just thinking outside the box. It ain't going to be Mark Cuban, in my opinion. He just doesn't. That's what they. If I were working at the DNC right now, I'd be like, yo, we're going back to square one, and like we need like some kind of
A black guy, but actually
candidate.
black this time.
Yeah, Dave Chappelle. Dave Chappelle.
No, I don't know. I mean, I don't see. I mean, they don't see who a clear leader is right now, and again, that's fine because I mean, yeah, Chuck Schumer, like, isn't he technically the highest ranking Democrat now?
I think so.
Yeah.
I do think that AOC is the
He doesn't know how
heir-apparent.
to cook hamburgers.
No, well, I mean, but they don't cook. They're super rich. They have people that do that for them.
Right.
Just likes it al dente. That's all.
Oh.
Jeez, al dente burgers. I do agree that AOC is probably the heir apparent. As to whether she can actually get the
To Alex Stein's great.
People are saying Crockett now.
Crockett.
Crockett? What's her name again?
Jasmine Crockett from Texas.
God, she's an idiot. Oh God.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, she is.
David Hogg.
She is out there more. She is out there more.
Yeah, I mean, she's very active on social media. I don't think that she has the same charisma that AOC.
No, and AOC's a supreme communicator.
And
you can disagree with her, but the way she uses social media, the way that she gets her audience, she's using the Zooms and doing all the Zoomer stuff and the TikTok thing, and
Yeah, I think that AOC.
You shouldn't underestimate AOC.
The charisma that AOC has is legit. Like, it's a real force to be reckoned with. I don't know that Crockett has the same kind of charisma. No. She's got a good Twitter account. She has no problem getting into arguments and disagreements, which is going to get attention, but I don't think that she will bring people to the Democrat Party. I think AOC has the ability to bring people to the Democrat Party. And I think that, and AOC is also a creation of the DSA, if I understand correctly. Like,
it wasn't,
or maybe it was the Justice
She worked
Democrats.
at USAID.
it was.
She worked at USAID, dude. Or she was overseas.
I was a bartender.
No, before she was a bartender.
okay.
After BC or BU, where did she go?
That's where the bar was at. Somehow it was in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, Pete Buttigieg.
No.
Mayor Pete.
He's not.
He's just your average hardworking McKinsey associate.
I just like how he's finally outspoken about aviation safety now that he's out.
Yeah, right.
I'm just so glad that
he's a straight white. I mean, he's a gay white man, and the gays are the new straight.
He's not
gays
straight,
are the new
dude.
Straight.
Fact check.
The thing is, the gays are the new straights. Like, if you're not queer, you're not a member. You're not an authentic member of the LGBTQIA identity.
If you're Christian and you have a family, then you're punk rock.
Well, yeah, because he's posing as a hetero person, right? They're doing the hetero thing. Him and his
straight
husband
presenting. That's
exactly. They're doing the normal.
Although let's be real, he's very feminine. Like he does, because it was what's his name, Clay Travis.
Yeah.
When he's like, Pete Buttigieg isn't manly, and the moderator's like, is that a gay joke? He's like, no, it's just he's not manly.
According to the progressives and the LGBTQIA lobby, like, he is
missed 3 letters.
LGBTQIA
Plus.
Oh, plus
division symbol. And then there's
that's
a couple
the
other exclamation
plus minus
point
divided by sign. But the thing is, they believe that because he's doing things that straight people do by adopting a kid, being married, having what you would consider a normal household, he's actually not queer. He's gay, but he's not.
And also just the fact that he can't attract black voters. That's the other thing. I mean, I would say that's his biggest. I would say that's his biggest handicap.
I don't know
to
that
try to be a national leader again.
I don't think that there's a lot of gay men that can attract black voters. I think black voters are put off by gay men generally, unless they're gay black men.
Yeah.
No comment. No comment on that.
Why
I think
not?
you're probably right, but I'm going to go ahead and I don't have enough melanin to comment.
Look, man, there are a lot of black Baptists. There are a lot, and black people are very, very religious, and so it's not because they're black. It's because of the fact that they're the culture.
Yeah.
Black people, there's a lot. Like, the South is full of black Baptist church, and you have everyone knows the stereotype of the Baptist church full of black people singing and praising Jesus, and like that, those people generally aren't going to vote for a gay man.
And look at the vaccination rates among different populations. Everyone was like obviously shining the light on like, oh, those Trumpers aren't going to take the vaccine. Obviously, that's what the media was saying. But if you looked at the actual numbers, it was black Americans who were the least likely to take.
Do you blame them?
Well, actually,
No, I mean, no, I didn't get vaccinated.
I went back to coach. I coached the hockey team in DC, and I went back to coach right after the pandemic. And the coach at the time, I was the assistant. He had like this long hair, and like he had grown it out during the pandemic. And I was like, "Hey, coach, like nice hair." And this is in front of all the guys. These are all college age kids, and I didn't get the old jabberoonie off the record, but. He was
Off the record.
I was like, nice hair, coach. He was like, I'm not going to cut it until every last Trumper gets the vaccine. And I just look at him. I'm like, what about all the black people? And he just went silent, and all the kids were like dying laughing because I mean it's true. He's like, come on, man.
And also,
Don't make this political here.
that's just peak, big city virtue signaling mentality. Like I'm not gonna do X, and like what was like the red lipstick thing after Trump won on TikTok where like people would. Was that a real thing or was
it's hard to tell anymore.
Yeah, it was because they're like we're gonna like the women were saying we're gonna wear red lipstick every day to like show our like an act of defiance of Trump. I'm not making this up. I could have sworn I saw that video. Whether it's a parody or not, I don't know. But that
well, plus like. It used to be the granola hippies on the left who were the anti-vax people, and it used to be the left that was the party of the party of free speech and the party of anti-war. And I'm like, okay, I was
Junior.
Yeah, I'm pro free speech, anti-war. Like, what does that make me now? Well, it makes you far right. That's what it makes you.
Well, because RFK Jr. his original support for all of his vaccine stuff was like big city or liberal women out in California.
Well, I mean, you mentioned political realignment. You look at the Trump administration. You've got RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, all these people that
bunch of former Democrats.
They all used to be Democrats, and that's part. I think that speaks to what we were talking about just a minute ago. The divide among the Democrats, which really I've been talking about this a little bit on the show. Really, what it is the people that voted for Donald Trump or the people that are under the big tent MAGA. They're all not leftists. That's all that it is.
Yeah.
It's the leftists that are vying for control. So people like AOC and people that are progressives, leftists, they're communists.
Not liberal. It's not liberal to be dogmatic and to censor free speech.
Not at all.
Sure.
And so it took a long time for the liberals to realize and get used to being called names by the progressives, because that's really what I think that's one of the things that was the strongest motivator was when the average Democrat was like, I don't know if it's a good idea to have men in girls' changing rooms. And the response was, you're an effing Nazi then. And then, so it took time for those people to build up the intestinal fortitude to realize, hey, they're just going to call me Nazis no matter what. Maybe these people maybe I don't align with these people politically after all. And I've been making the argument that we've lived in a leftist milieu for so long without people realizing it, that the left has been so in control that really the political factions in the United States are now progressive leftists and not. So this really kind of became apparent, at least in my opinion, when you had like Ashley Sinclair come out that she had Elon Musk's baby, and there were a bunch of people on the right that are conservative saying this isn't conservative, that we shouldn't support this isn't conservative. And it's like, well, you're correct, it's not, but you don't like the MAGA
you
movement.
thought that Trump was a tried and true conservative.
The MAGA movement is a big tent, and so if you want to continue to win elections, you're not going to make the effort to kick people out because they do things in their personal lives that you don't like.
Yeah.
If you can align with them just for the purposes of politics and voting, then you can have the big tent and you'll get a lot of what you want. And the evidence of that is the repealing of Roe versus Wade. That was because of Donald Trump. If you were looking at Donald Trump and saying he's not a good Christian, he's had multiple marriages, he had sex out of wedlock, he's done things that are distasteful to Christians, and so I won't vote for him, which there were people that were making those arguments. They were saying he's not, he's not pro-life enough, even though he's the reason that Roe versus Wade was repealed.
Yeah.
There were people making the argument he's not conservative enough, he's not Christian enough, so I'm not going to vote him. Well, if you are going to do that, then you are going to lose, because the plurality of the United States, whereas they may have a plurality, they don't have enough people to win elections.
Yeah.
And so I think that it's just a situation of not the left and
Exactly.
the far left. And so who do you think wins the Democrat Party? Do you guys think that the not left will go back to the left, or do you think that the not left center, the left leaning center will go back and will get in bed with the far left again, who are burning, looking to riot, looking for civil strife, looking to possibly start commit crimes and stuff in pursuit of a political end? What do you guys think?
Well, if AOC loses to J.D. Vance in 2028, maybe then they go back to the drawing board. But in 2016, after Trump won, I was like, oh, everyone's gonna like have a come to Jesus moment of like, oh, I guess we kind of like lost the plot as far as like the Democrat Party and what they stood for. That didn't happen, obviously, and it's not happening in 2024. So I do think there's a couple more losses involved in the future before they will actually redraw what the Democrat Party looks like.
Yeah, whatever they do, I hope they lose. I'm a simple man. I'm a simple man.
Who's they? The progressives?
Doesn't even care about JFK. I mean, blew his head off, man.
Because I agree with you. I hope the progressives lose.
Yeah. Well, I guess my real answer would be I think the money wins out, right? And who has the money right now, in terms of like the party? It's going to be the old guard. It's going to be people that don't like, as you were saying, because no, we don't want taxing on unrealized gains. We don't want all this stuff. So I think eventually the money's going to win out. I like the donors, the long established, because usually, I mean, there's that joke that comfortably smug, right? The establishment always wins.
Yeah,
and I think that's true to a certain extent.
It's funny that comfortably smug.
Well, of course,
he's got a great account.
Yeah, well, of course. But there's truth to that, right? And so I think it would have to be like a seismic, radical event, or maybe a blowout like Reagan had electorally, in order for them to consider them the other options, right? But I don't see that happening in terms of it being so catastrophically a catastrophic result in an election. I just don't think how, with the way that the political views are right now. But I mean, who knows, right? I mean, that's what makes politics fun, right? There's so you can have all these conventions, you can game it out, you can project it, you can do the polling, but at the end of the day, it all comes down to turnout, right? It all comes down to turnout, and voters like. I will never understand it. I will never understand how you can like vote for Biden in 2020 and then all of a sudden, you know what, let's go back to Trump or something. I will never understand that, but there's a lot of people who do think that way.
Allegedly voted for Biden.
Allegedly, I was gonna I was gonna say voting for Biden, but so yeah, I don't know, and that's what's gonna make. It's what's going to make 2028, and I think, again, not to get too much in the weeds of it, but it will depend on what happens in the midterms.
Yeah.
Because because the economy is still very fragile right now. It's not where it needs to be, and so it could just be something as simple as that, where just historically, obviously, the party in charge of an economic downturn is not going to win a national election.
Well, you remember those waves of the migrant caravans that were coming up right before the midterms in 2018.
Yeah.
And the whole kids in cages narrative that we were talking about. The question is what do they have left in their playbook to pull out of the, like 20. I think most people didn't see, COVID coming, or the assassination attempt on Trump. Although I did predict that in May of 20.
The assassination attempt on Trump was way easier to predict than COVID.
Yeah. Well, and that's the question: what else is left in the playbook?
Right, yeah.
And that's the scary question, because if you back these swamp donkeys against a wall, like what are they going to do? Something.
So is it your sense that they've actually run out of things, or do you think that or what is it that you think that they might do?
I honestly, what else is left?
Well,
attack or
I think that's what I was thinking. Like, some kind of false flag attack, or a false flag terrorist attack. But I don't think that they have the mojo to do it anymore.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
They've lost control of
lost rounds.
There was a time where I thought that the left was like, I wasn't confident that Donald Trump was going to win at all. I was very, very skeptical.
Well, then you should be in a crystal right now.
Because I was skeptical?
No, you should be in a crystal right now for not believing, not having the faith.
No, that's where the libs go to the crystals. I voted.
No. All black pillars also go to the crystals.
Okay, well, I was skeptical. I didn't think, and the reason is because I believe that the or I believed that the left had such a full and total control over the narrative machine, over the media. And it wasn't until the last probably couple of weeks where I was like, maybe he actually will pull this off.
Well, I would agree. They did have the narrative. They did have control of the narrative, but people tuned it out.
I thought that people were more susceptible to the propaganda.
The moment he survived that assassination, my wife was crying, and I was like, "Why are you crying? He just won." Because I mean,
heck yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. And now, I mean, Trump obviously utilized new media to win. And like the left is like, we need our Joe Rogan. It's like, yeah, his name was Joe Rogan. And he was on the left.
Yeah.
But
oh no, they got Hassan now.
Oh God. He's a literal terrorist sympathizer.
Oh, I know.
So, anyways, all right. So
it fits perfectly. It fits,
does, right?
It fits perfectly.
Well, with the new Democrat.
With the new
Party,
Democrats,
right?
yeah, it's perfect.
So I think it's time we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. So, Julio, if you got any final thoughts?
Yeah, this is going to be not to be too predictable, but it's going to be an interesting year, right? Because then after this, then it's the midterms, and then right after that's 2028. So I'm looking forward to seeing how all of this plays out. Just because, it's anyone's game in terms of how the left reacts, and so we'll see what happens once the deportations really start ramping up and once it gets warmer, for most of the country. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, because obviously you have the stories about how the border is doing now, and obviously not much is happening. There's the border wall construction, and that's all fine and dandy, and that's obviously something I'm planning as well. But the fireworks are going to be further within the country again.
Richie?
Well, I'm going to shamelessly plug Riot Diet. So in the meantime, until we have more potential unrest, go get Riot Diet. Get Fiery but Mostly Peaceful, Julio's book as well. You guys can read some stories about the riots of 2020, and also subscribe to Politbrawl. Check it out.
All right. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm Phil That Remains, or on X if you want to call it that. We'll be back. Actually, go to timcast.com, become a member, join the Discord.
Cast Brew Coffee.
Well, no, I mean, we're not doing that ad right now. But,
I'm sorry.
You want to run a
I was just trying to take Tim's, I need my beanie. I can't just forget about it. Congrats to Tim, though. Congrats to Tim.
Yeah, right.
Oh, yeah,
So,
that's right. Yeah, that's why. Yeah.
The baby was born, I believe, last night. So it's official. So the baby has been here. I'm not going to say anything more than that because that's Tim's prerogative. So I don't want to step on any toes. But yeah, I'm here doing the show because Tim was indisposed with family matters, having his first child. So, but come back here tonight. I will be hosting IRL. I'm not sure who the guest is. Who's the guest, Kelly?
Will Chamberlain.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, Will Chamberlain. There you go. That's great. Not the basketball player. So we'll see you tonight.